not quite sure what our community wants. How can we be effective? What advice would you give to a church like that?
Everyone was shocked because what came back was they don't need another food pantry there. What they needed, as Christians, we need to love and serve our communities with no strings attached. Whether they come to know God or whether they don't shouldn't impact our desire as Christians to love and serve our communities. But that's the challenge, and God's mission for us is to go out. It's not about getting people to come to us, it's about getting people to go out and make a difference.
Hi Charlene, tell me, who are you and what do you do?
Well, my name's Charlene, as you said, and I work for ADRA. I love working for ADRA. I've worked with ADRA for about over 16 years now in various capacities, international, national, and at the moment I'm working in the ADRA Australia National Department, where there are a lot of exciting things happening. We've got over 100 projects across the country, over 1,500 passionate volunteers that are making a difference in their communities every day.
Great. And so ADRA, what does ADRA mean?
So ADRA is the Adventist Development and Relief Agency. We're a not-for-profit organisation, the humanitarian arm of the Adventist Church. So we work very closely with churches. We are a part of the church, and we really want to see churches getting involved and really making a difference in their communities.
That's a great point to start our conversation about making a difference in our community. Like I hear a lot of people say to me, oh, look, our church, we know we should be doing something. We're not quite sure what our community wants. How can we be effective? What advice would you give to a church like that?
Yeah, and that's a very, very good question. And the fact that that church is asking that question is the first point. So many of our churches think that just evangelism is what our church is here for, and that's absolutely true, but there are different ways to reach the community, different ways to spread the gospel of Jesus, and we know that saying very well about being the hands and feet of Jesus. So a church that is asking the question, how can we make a difference in our community, shows that they recognize, that they understand that they have a role in that community to play. And we often say to churches, if your church burnt down tomorrow, how would the community react? Would they even know? Would it be blasted across every news and internet site in that community? Would it be on the front page of their newspaper? Tragedy, the Adventist church is no longer standing to serve our community. What would be the response? And that can be quite a humbling question to ask. What would happen?
So from your perspective then, what are some of the areas of need that you see in communities? You know, what are some of the spaces that churches could help?
Yeah, we don't have to go very far to discover the cost of living impact that that's having on everyday Australians. What we're finding is that there are more and more people coming to our programs, coming to our food pantries and our community meal programs and our community gardens saying, we just can't put food on our table. And so every community would have people who are now vulnerable that weren't some time ago, and we're having people coming in and saying, I don't even know how to do this. How do I even ask for help? Because I've never had to before. And so churches do not have to look very far to find people who are in vulnerable situations, who are looking for help, who often don't know how to find help. And that's a space where our churches can stand up and say, hey, we're here to serve, we're here to help, to do what we can do. Let's discuss as a church what we can do to help.
You mentioned things like food pantries. So obviously with financial stress, people can't afford to buy the groceries, the needs they have for their families. So churches can help in that sort of capacity. Can you tell me examples of what churches are doing in that space?
Yeah, we do have a lot of food pantries. What we're trying to work with our churches with is to help them understand the difference between welfare and development.
Okay.
Because speaking of food pantries is a very transactional process just in and of itself. Okay,
Sure.
Someone needs food, they come up, ask for help, you hand over a food parcel, and they go on their way. Now that's just, you've heard the saying before of give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. So
Okay.
does his family. What we're trying to help our churches understand is when we're looking at community needs and looking what to do, we want to ask not just what can we do to help, but what's going to be the most effective and beneficial way to help. Let me give an example. I've worked with ADRA for I think over 16 years now, and I've had lots of experiences of churches coming to me and saying, "Hey, Charlene, we really want to do a food pantry." And I say, "That's great, but what else can we do?" Because if we are just, there's a demonstrated need. People need food. But if they just come to us each day or each week saying, "Hey, I need food, here you are, goodbye," are they actually experiencing any change and positive benefit that's going to last, or is it just a welfare-based interaction? And what we're challenging our food pantries and the churches that are working in those spaces, what else can we do to offer something that will help them experience positive change?
So that's a great point. So obviously there's a short-term need. Someone's hungry, they've got to feed their family. So we need to meet that need. But to stop them keeping in that same cycle, how do they break out of that cycle? So what could churches do to help somebody teach them to fish?
And this is where we really come down to relationships. Having opportunities to build relationships with people through activities or events to come to a point to say, "Hey, I understand you need some food. Here you go. This is going to keep you going for a few days."
Yeah.
But it's the but then that we're trying to encourage. But here, let's get to know you. Let's find out what the underlying deeper causes and the needs are to be able to refer to other organisations and other assistance. It might be, if it's social related issues, hey, we've got this event on. It's about making those relationships to then walk with that person on the journey to a point where they do experience some positive change. Now, we've been speaking about welfare a little bit. We actually have to consider that when we are helping someone, we have to be really careful not to create a dependence on our service. And so we work with our teams to challenge them and say, "Hey, how can we operate this program in a way that doesn't cause dependence?" Because if we stop operating tomorrow, are those people who've been coming to us going to fall into a deeper point of vulnerability because we have just been, every day, if they come every day and we give them food every day, they're no longer having to financially prepare to provide for their families.
So can you give me an example then of how a church can help somebody take that next step, beyond welfare? Can you think of a specific example?
Yeah, for example, up in Northern Australia, we were meeting with a church there and they were saying, "Hey, we want to do something food related." But we said, "Hey, why don't we go through a process together of doing a community needs assessment? Because then we can actually make our decisions based on data to make sure we don't duplicate anything. Because if there's other services already happening in that town, you don't want to be duplicating and wasting everyone's time because we know that church members, they're already busy people." So they did that. They went through the process, they consulted with the community, and they came back without even having to properly analyse a lot of the data saying, wow, the needs just shone through. Right here, we have an issue with suicide and an issue with depression and anxiety. And so that church went on to do the Nedley Depression Recovery Program, and that's just one example. Another example is from quite some years ago. We were working with a church in New Zealand, and they came to us saying, "Hey, we really, really, really want to do a food pantry." And we said, "Well, just can we consult the community?" And it was a lot of back and forth. But they went and we did a lot of community consultation, and everyone was shocked because what came back was they don't need another food pantry there. What they needed was a space for high school students to be able to study and have access to the internet and be supervised, because at home it was too noisy, they didn't have proper internet, and who would have thought that was a need? But because we went and asked, we were able to find a solution that was actually making an impact in those students' lives. So yeah, there's lots of examples of churches just not going on what we think the community needs, because from our perspective we only see through one lens. But when we take the time and have the respect to actually spend time in the community and ask the community, what is it that you need? Often it can be very different to what you expect.
So I really like that approach of identify the need in your community and then see if you've got skills or resources to meet that need. Is that complex process though? Like, can a church do that, community evaluation, or do they need help from an organisation like yourself?
Yeah, there's different levels of it, but the way we work with our churches is say, look, let's just take one step at a time together. And so ADRA has regional managers and conference ADRA directors around the country, and that's part of their role, is to walk side by side with that church through each step. Because if we say, hey, you need to do this, and this, and then you end up at a project, it could be quite overwhelming. But just walking through saying, hey, let's take this step. Here's a community needs survey that we've done. Here's some ideas. What do you guys think you should do? And working with the youth and the church to go out and, do these surveys. We really want to walk the churches through that process.
And so one mistake you've identified that churches can make is just rushing out with an idea, and your community may not need it. What other mistakes do you see churches making?
I think that's probably one of the main ones, and I've seen it quite a few times, where, as I said before, we know that people don't have much time these days. And so we want to make sure that any intervention that happens is carefully planned, because I've seen a church group start up a soup kitchen, and they spent hours cooking each week. They prepped the church hall. They invited everyone. But after 6 months, they said, look, this really isn't working. And it was at that point that they then did a little bit more research. And I really want to, shift a little bit and give an example of the Air Church in Northern Australia. This is from my time when I was there some years ago, and something that really struck me was this concept about earning your right to be in the community. And I've done the ADRA appeal in various places over the years, and it's ADRA appeal time at the moment. But I've been door knocking at many places. But what made the difference when I was door knocking in Air one year is Air was running 3 different initiatives in the community. There was a school breakfast. There were so many kids that were not eating like more than one meal a day. It was crazy. And we were doing a school breakfast. We were doing the Nedley program, and I think it was a food program. And as I went door to door, I knocked on the door, and the reaction was, oh, who? And then they'd look down at my shirt and see ADRA, and they just went, oh, ADRA, thank you so much. Our kids are getting really good breakfast. Oh, ADRA, my friend is in the Nedley program and is making such a difference. And just the fact that church and was present in the community, connected, serving the needs, then meant that when I went knocking on that door, it was opened with open arms. It was as if that church had almost earned their right to be in the community because they were making a difference, they were connecting, and they were serving that community. And a few times during the ADRA appeal time, which is where we do the door-to-door collecting, church members have said, well, while I'm going out there, can I just take my Bible studies and other things and go and, knock out 2 birds with 1 stone? And my question back was, is this the only time that you are connecting with your church, your community, this whole year? Because if that's the case, then something's wrong. If they're, taking the opportunity to jump on the ADRA appeals back to go and hand out the magazines, that's not what it's about. We need to get out into our communities and build relationships, love on people. How many church members know the names of the neighbours on either side of the church that have been there for 15 years? It all comes down to building those relationships, because when those relationships are formed and people are coming to a safe place in their community that they know they can find open arms to welcome them, they can have a meal or whatever it is, and they can connect, that's when opportunities for ministry are the most evident, because people ask the questions, why are you here? Why are you could be doing anything else right now, but why are you here helping me? And that question gets asked a lot. And that opens the door for a beautiful conversation about someone sharing, well, because I'm a Christian and because I love God. And it opens a lot of doors for evangelism in that respect.
So I like what you're saying because, while people do have physical needs, social needs, and we need to meet those needs, sometimes we are eager to sort of think, oh, we've got to convert them. Let's baptize them.
And we do see that quite regularly.
And, and rushing into that too quickly can burn bridges with people or...
And it gives the wrong view of the message. Like Jesus didn't say, go and attend the synagogue for 2 weeks before I heal you. That was not the case. And I've seen it quite a few times where people are coming to get a meal because they're hungry, because they're cold, because they're desperate. And they actually have to sit down and listen to a 15-minute mini sermon, before they say prayer and eat. And that's not okay. As Christians, we need to love and serve our communities with no strings attached. Whether they come to know God or whether they don't shouldn't impact our desire as Christians to love and serve our communities. So there's a lot of questions that have been coming through. Well, can we talk about God at an ADRA project? Absolutely. But are we giving that individual the choice to be in this conversation? What a lot of things, like what we do with our food hampers, when it happens all the time, people say, can we put Science magazines and Bibles in the hampers? And we say no, because we're not giving them the choice. What we can do is have a table over there with someone sitting there that says, hey, come and take what you want. Or, here's a sign that says, we do a Bible study on a Wednesday night. Let us know if you want to join. It's about giving that person the choice. And when they come to our volunteers and say, hey, tell me more about this Jesus of yours, or tell me more about what you're doing, that's when those conversations are invited and they have the deepest root.
So I like that insight. So what you're saying is serve their needs, be friends, listen to them, and then opportunities will arise where you can share your story. But listen to their story first, is what I hear is talking about. Yeah, fantastic. So sometimes there's a barrier for smaller churches saying, there's only a few of us. We don't have many resources. We don't have expertise in any space. Are you seeing little churches being effective in engaging?
Absolutely. A lot of people think that you need to do something big when you're doing something for the community, but it doesn't have to be. Things are scalable. I think the main question to ask is, are we as a church wanting and willing to reaching out into our communities to have an impact for God? And if you guys answer yes to that, then it's up to God to lead you into what it is you need to be doing in that community. Put it to prayer. Make it a matter of prayer. Reach out to your local ADRA regional manager or conference ADRA director and say, our church is really keen to be doing more in our community, and just start that conversation. Because it's not just a decision right then and there, it's a journey that you go on together as a church to find out where it is that God leads you.
What about, let's say I'm somebody in my church and I'm excited. I want to do something in my community and I understand the process now, find out what my community needs. But most of the other church members are not really keen. They're busy, they don't really care, or they don't want to do it. How do I bring my vision to life? If everybody else doesn't want to do it, how do I convince them or share the excitement?
Yeah, good question. There's multiple options available. What we're looking at having across all churches is an ADRA champion. And that's someone that the church nominates who's passionate in that space. So becoming an ADRA champion, you get connected in with our ADRA head office, who provides resources to answer those kind of questions. What can I do in my church to help get my church excited? So that's a very practical option. So go and chat to your pastor to see if there is an ADRA champion. If not, put your hand up for it. That's a very practical way. Another way is, of course, committing it to prayer. Because in a lot of situations where you can't see a way through, God can make a way. And I know that if there are individuals in churches who see that their churches are very inwardly focused and they are praying to God, God, help lead our church to realize that in the times that we're living in now, there are people in our community who are just looking for hope, who are looking for help. I want to see my church be active in that space, committed to prayer. Each week as you're at church, just chat to other people about it. Do you see what I see in the community? Hop up the front and share some statistics about, the cost of living crisis and vulnerability in your area. Even, if there isn't a place for you to currently volunteer right now, look elsewhere to volunteer, just to get connected, to just have that opportunity to be sharing what you're doing with others.
That's an interesting insight, and I love that focus on prayer, and working on your own heart and God hopefully influencing and softening the heart of other people within your church. But they could also do some homework or get some experience by working with a local nearby church who is already doing a program. Go and check out what they're doing, and serve the Lord in that way. And maybe that experience could be valuable to bring back to their own church one day when the church is active again. And
I think it's just about voicing your passion. Let your pastor know, hey, this is an area I'm really passionate about. And, if the pastor and the elders support you, then that's great. But there may be times where you struggle to see that passion spread. But don't be discouraged. Make yourself known to the ADRA conference, ADRA director, or the regional manager, because there are other opportunities when it comes to disaster response. We're often looking for people to be trained up to help us in disasters. So there's another option.
That's a great point. So I've lived in a regional town, and often there's bushfire threats, flooding, all sorts of natural disasters. So what role do churches, or can churches play in those sort of situations in partnership with ADRA?
Yeah. So any time that we as ADRA see that there is a approaching potential weather event or some kind of disaster, we're actually proactive in reaching out to the pastors and the contacts that we have in those local churches. And we say, look, it may or may not happen, but just get prepared. These are ways that you can get prepared. These are sources of information that you can keep an eye on that are trustworthy, because, there's a lot of hype sometimes. So we want to know what sources we should be getting our information from, so that when it comes to the point of that disaster happening, we've actually reached out to those churches. But, sometimes those calls or those emails might be missed. So there's nothing stopping our churches reaching out to us saying, hey, we want to be prepared, we want to respond. So communication is the key, and we're doing our best to communicate out beforehand. And we're challenging and encouraging our churches to be prepared for disasters as a household, as a church. So what are the steps that you can do as a household? If a disaster happened tomorrow and your family was scattered at different places and the phones are down, do you have a plan to know where you go to meet? Do you have a kit at home that has, all the usual items for a preparedness kit? Do you have that, and does all your family know where it is? These are the kind of steps that individual households can take, but also as a church. What do we want to do as a church if a disaster hits? And we've been working with churches, especially in those regions that are very disaster prone, to help them to be more ready to face disasters. Last week I was privileged to be at an emergency response training up in Brisbane, where we had individuals from across this side of the country all come together to work together, and we did a tabletop exercise where we simulated a disaster, because we're doing what we can to prepare beforehand, because preparation is key.
Great, fantastic. We have viewers from right around the world, but particularly the South Pacific. Is ADRA in most countries in the South Pacific?
Yes, in not all of them, but in most countries. And we actually have quite a strong disaster-ready program across the Pacific. I work with National, so I have a little bit less to do with that. But we have a very strong program, because, as you know, the Pacific gets a lot of disasters every year, and ADRA is responding every year to those disasters. So it's good networks.
What about partnerships then? Like, often we think churches, identify the need, go out and meet that need, but they don't have to do it alone. Is there any benefit in forming strategic partnerships with schools or the council or other organisations in their own community? Can you give some advice about that?
Yeah, very much so, especially when it comes to disasters. We have a few councils around the country that we have worked a lot with. One of them is Cardinia down in Victoria. And because that relationship just continues to strengthen, often when we start a project, we have to search for funding and we've got to apply here and apply there. But because of those relationships and that strength, that council is just saying, hey, we've got this opportunity, we've got this opportunity. So having those relationships established beforehand is very important. And as each disaster happens and we respond, those relationships are strengthened. But even just not talking about emergency management, just talking about our national program projects, we encourage that, it's a community. Communities are very intertwined, and we encourage our projects to get to know the other players in the community, to work together, because as we all know, when you work together, more can be done.
Great. And we'll put some more information about ADRA in the link for this video. So if anyone wants to find out more, just check out the link. I guess one final question is in the space of, so if someone's watching, they're keen to get started, they've heard some great tips, any final advice about how people, churches can be more effective in serving their communities?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got our ADRA website, www.adra.org.au. Jump on there. We've got various resources. We've actually got a map on there where you can actually pull up the map and see where all the ADRA projects are to see if there's one near you. And that's also on there for people who are just looking for assistance. They can find what's close to them. I'd recommend just talk to others in your vicinity about your passion. Challenge others to think outside the box, to think outside their everyday world, to look out into the community, to realise what's going on around me, because we can be so insular and just focus on the things that I have to do. But that's the challenge, and God's mission for us is to go out. It's not about getting people to come to us, it's about getting people to go out and make a difference. And if I can just share a powerful story that I've heard recently. There was a 22-year-old young lady that was walking around the streets of Melbourne late one night. She'd had a lot of trouble at home. She was just not knowing where to go or what to do. She didn't have money, she didn't have support, and she was asking the question to herself, is my life worth living anymore? And it was freezing cold. She came around a corner and saw this big colourful bus with ADRA written on it. It was the Pakenham bus down in Victoria. And she thought, what's ADRA? And as she came up to the bus, the people that were working there just welcomed her and said, hey, how you going? And just loved on her. She started coming back each week, connecting, building relationships. She shared that she loves knitting, and so they got her knitting beanies for homeless people. Before long, she was volunteering, helping out each week. She was wearing her ADRA shirt. She was part of the family and just loving on it. And she made a decision to come to know God through that. And since then, she has been sharing the good news with her father, who's, I believe, is now considering or has been baptised. And she's actually speaking on behalf of ADRA at community events, and just looking at that change, going from despondency to a place of belonging, to a place where she now has a voice that she's sharing and advocating on behalf of other vulnerable people. What a beautiful, beautiful story, a beautiful journey that was possible because church members were out there caring and loving on those in their community.
Wow.
And that's what we want to see. We want to see our churches being relevant and blessing and loving on their communities.
I love that story. That's so good. Charlene, thank you so much for your time today and sharing stories, and I guess the great work that ADRA is doing. So may God bless and continue to bless ADRA. And to our viewer, if you'd like to hear more stories like this, we'd encourage you to like and follow or subscribe so you can seek more great, inspiring interviews too. Thank you.